My name is Samantha, and I'm 32 years old. I never imagined that losing my baby daughter Lily after a complicated pregnancy would be just the beginning of my pain. While planning her tiny funeral, my parents made a choice I couldn't comprehend. They decided my brother Tyler's pool party celebrating his promotion was more important. Their exact words still haunt me. "It's just a baby, your brother needs us more." I stood there completely shattered as my world collapsed around me. Before I share this heartbreaking journey with you, please let me know where you're watching from. In the comments, hit that like button and subscribe to follow my story of betrayal and healing. I grew up in a modest suburban neighborhood in Chicago, where the houses all looked similar, with their neatly trimmed lawns and two-car garages. Our family appeared normal from the outside, but inside our home, the dynamics were painfully clear from as early as I can remember. My younger brother Tyler was the golden child while I existed in his shadow. When Tyler was born, I was 4 years old. I remember my grandmother giving me a doll to prepare me for being a big sister. I was excited to help care for my baby brother, but I quickly realized that my parents' attention had shifted entirely. What started as natural focus on a newborn never actually balanced out as we grew older. On my 8th birthday, my parents promised a small party with a few friends. The morning of the celebration, Tyler, then 4, came down with a mild cold. Nothing serious, just a runny nose and slight fever. My party wasn't canceled, but my mother spent the entire time tending to Tyler in the other room. When it came time for cake, she rushed through the song and hurried back to him. My father barely noticed, busy making sure Tyler had everything he needed. I blew out my candles alone, wishing things could be different. By contrast, when Tyler turned 8, he received an elaborate dinosaur-themed party, complete with professional decorations. A reptile handler who brought actual lizards for the children to interact with, and personalized gift bags for every guest. My parents took the entire day off work to ensure everything was perfect. I still remember my mother spending weeks planning it, while my birthday that same year consisted of a store-bought cake after school. The pattern continued throughout our school years. I maintained straight A's, joined the debate team, and worked hard to earn my parents' approval. My report cards were met with casual acknowledgments, while Tyler's C's were celebrated with ice cream because at least he passed. When I won first place in the science fair in 10th grade, my parents couldn't attend the ceremony because Tyler had a soccer game where he mostly sat on the bench. I learned to find validation elsewhere. My teachers appreciated my hard work, and I formed close friendships with people who valued me. Still, the ache for parental approval never fully disappeared. I threw myself into academics, eventually earning a scholarship to nursing school, drawn to a profession where I could care for others in ways I hadn't been cared for. Tyler took a different path. He dropped out of community college after one semester, claiming it wasn't for him. Our parents immediately supported his decision, offering to help him find his passion. He bounced between jobs, never keeping one for more than a few months, always with a different excuse. Each time, our parents would cushion his fall with financial support and endless encouragement. "He's just finding his way," they'd say, while I worked 2 jobs to cover my remaining college expenses. I chose pediatric nursing as my specialty. There was something healing about creating safe, nurturing spaces for children. My colleagues noticed my natural ability to connect with scared children, to calm them with gentle explanations and genuine care. What they didn't know was that I was giving these children the attention and validation I had craved throughout my own childhood. During my second year as a nurse, I met Michael in the hospital cafeteria. He was a pharmaceutical sales representative visiting the hospital, and he asked if he could share my table during a crowded lunch hour. His warm smile and easy conversation were a welcome break in my hectic day. We exchanged numbers, and within weeks we were dating steadily. Michael came from a loving, tight-knit family. The first time he invited me to Sunday dinner with his parents, Barbara and John, I felt awkward and uncertain. I watched in amazement as his parents asked him detailed questions about his work, genuinely interested in his responses. Then, to my surprise, they turned to me with the same attentiveness, wanting to know about my nursing career and my interests outside of work. By the end of the evening, Barbara hugged me goodbye, a warm, encompassing embrace that brought unexpected tears to my eyes. As our relationship deepened, Michael witnessed the stark difference between our families. The first time he accompanied me to my parents' house for dinner, Tyler dominated the conversation with stories about his latest job prospect. My parents hung on his every word, barely acknowledging the news of my recent promotion at the hospital. In the car ride home, Michael was quiet for several minutes before saying, "They don't see how amazing you are, do they?" That simple observation, spoken with such gentleness, broke something open in me. For years, I had normalized their behavior, made excuses, and blamed myself. Hearing someone else name it so plainly was both painful and liberating. Michael proposed a year later, and we planned a small ceremony with close friends and family. My parents attended, but complained about the morning time slot conflicting with Tyler's recreational basketball game. They left immediately after the ceremony, missing the reception entirely. Michael's parents stepped in, treating me like the daughter they'd always wanted, helping with wedding details and embracing me fully into their family. After we married, I found myself longing for a child of my own, someone I could shower with the unconditional love I knew I was capable of giving. Michael shared this dream, and we began trying to start our family. I imagined creating new family traditions, breaking the cycles of favoritism and neglect that had marked my childhood. I pictured holiday gatherings where every person felt valued, and celebrations where no one was an afterthought. With each negative pregnancy test, the longing grew stronger. Michael would hold me during these disappointments, assuring me that our time would come. His parents offered emotional support without pressure, a stark contrast to my own mother, who would casually mention that Tyler would make such beautiful babies whenever the topic of grandchildren arose, despite the fact that Tyler wasn't even in a serious relationship. After almost a year of trying, I began to worry something might be wrong. I scheduled appointments with specialists, underwent tests, and followed every recommendation. Through it all, Michael's parents checked in regularly with genuine concern, while my own parents remained largely uninterested in our fertility struggles. When I called my mother in tears, after a particularly discouraging doctor's appointment, she listened for barely 2 minutes before changing the subject to Tyler's job interview at a prestigious marketing firm. This was the reality. I had grown accustomed to the family dynamic I had accepted as normal for too long. But as Michael and I worked toward creating our own family, I began to envision a different kind of parenthood, one where every child was seen, heard, and valued equally. Little did I know how severely that vision would be tested, or how the dream of creating that loving family would become both my greatest sorrow and my most important lesson. After 18 months of trying to conceive, the 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test seemed almost miraculous. I took 3 more tests just to be sure, lining them up on the bathroom counter as evidence. When Michael came home from work, I greeted him with tears of joy, wordlessly leading him to the bathroom to see the tests for himself. His face transformed with wonder as he pulled me into a tight embrace, both of us laughing and crying simultaneously. We decided to wait until after the first trimester to share our news widely, though we immediately told Michael's parents, who responded with excited plans to help set up the nursery and offers to host a baby shower. When we finally called my parents at the 12-week mark, my mother's response was tepid at best. "That's nice, honey," she said, her voice flat. "Have you heard that Tyler is up for a promotion at his new job? He's only been there for 3 months and they already recognize his potential." I pressed the phone harder against my ear, straining to hear any genuine excitement for my news, but there was none to be found. Michael, seeing my face fall gently, took the phone and enthusiastically shared details about the due date and our recent ultrasound, trying to generate the enthusiasm my parents lacked. When he hung up, he simply held me, no words needed between us. Our early prenatal appointments went smoothly. I loved hearing our baby's heartbeat strong and rapid at each checkup. We declined to learn the gender, wanting to be surprised, though. We playfully debated names for both possibilities. Michael would rest his hand on my growing belly each night, talking softly to our child about the wonderful life awaiting them. At 22 weeks, I noticed light spotting one morning before work. Having treated many pregnant women during my nursing career, I knew this could be harmless, but could also indicate problems. I called my obstetrician, Dr. Martinez, who asked me to come in immediately for an evaluation. The ultrasound revealed that the placenta was beginning to separate from the uterine wall, a condition called placental abruption. Dr. Martinez's usually cheerful face was serious as she explained the risks. "This is a partial abruption," she explained, pointing to the ultrasound image. "The good news is that it's minor at this point, and the baby's heartbeat remains strong. However, we'll need to monitor you very closely. You'll need to reduce your activities significantly, avoid any lifting, and come in for weekly ultrasounds." I was immediately placed on modified bed rest and had to take a leave from my nursing position. Michael rearranged his work schedule to handle more household responsibilities and drive me to appointments. Each week brought a mixture of hope and anxiety as we watched for any changes in the condition. At 26 weeks, the spotting increased, and I experienced sharp abdominal pain while reading in bed. Michael rushed me to the emergency room, where another ultrasound showed the abruption had worsened. I was admitted to the hospital for continuous monitoring and received steroid injections to help accelerate the baby's lung development in case of premature birth. I called my parents from the hospital bed, hoping for some comfort and support. My mother answered on the fourth ring, sounding distracted. "Mom, I'm in the hospital," I began, my voice shaking. "There are complications with the pregnancy. The doctors are concerned about the baby." "Oh dear," she said, and for a moment I thought I heard genuine concern. "What terrible timing. Your father and I were just about to leave to help Tyler move into his new apartment. He got that promotion, and found a beautiful place downtown." The monitor beside my bed showed my heart rate increasing. "Mom, I don't think you understand. I might lose this baby. The doctors say the next 48 hours are critical." "I'm sure everything will be fine," she replied dismissively. "Lots of women have complications. Besides, you're in a hospital with doctors. Tyler really needs our help with this move. His new position is very demanding, and he doesn't have time to unpack everything himself." I hung up shortly after, tears streaming down my face. Michael, who had stepped out to get coffee, returned to find me sobbing. When I explained the conversation, his jaw tightened with anger, but he quickly softened, focusing on comforting me instead of fueling my distress with his own outrage. "Your parents might not be here," he said gently, "but I am, and my parents are already on their way. You're not alone, Samantha. Our baby is not alone." True to his word, Barbara and John arrived at the hospital 2 hours later, having driven straight from their home 3 hours away. They brought comfort items for my hospital stay and took turns sitting with me when Michael needed to step out. Their unwavering presence highlighted the gaping absence of my own parents, who didn't even call to check on my condition. After 5 days in the hospital, the abruption stabilized enough for me to return home, though, with strict bed rest orders and twice-weekly doctor visits. Michael converted our living room into a temporary bedroom, so I wouldn't have to navigate the stairs. His mother stayed with us for 2 weeks, cooking meals, handling housework, and providing emotional support. During this time, we decided to name our baby, wanting to acknowledge their personhood, regardless of the outcome. After much discussion, we settled on Lily for a girl and Ethan for a boy. Having a name made our conversations about the future more concrete, more real, despite the uncertainty that shadowed each day. My parents finally visited once, a brief 30-minute stop while they were in town for one of Tyler's work events. They seemed uncomfortable in our home, my mother glancing frequently at her watch, my father making awkward small talk about the weather. Neither of them mentioned the baby by name, referring only to the pregnancy, in vague, detached terms. When my mother noticed the small collection of baby clothes and supplies we had begun to gather, she frowned. "You really shouldn't get too attached," she advised coldly. "Given the complications, best not to get your hopes up too high." I watched them leave with a strange sense of clarity. These people, my parents by birth, were incapable of offering the support I needed. The realization was painful, but also oddly freeing. I decided to focus my limited emotional energy on the people who showed up for me, and on staying as calm and positive as possible for my baby. At 32 weeks, the worst happened. I woke in the middle of the night with severe cramping and heavy bleeding. Michael called an ambulance, and I was rushed back to the hospital. Dr. Martinez determined that a complete placental abruption had occurred, and an emergency C-section was necessary to save the baby. Everything after that became a blur of operating room lights, urgent medical terms, and fear so intense it felt like another presence in the room. I remember gripping Michael's hand as they administered the anesthesia, whispering desperate prayers for our child's survival. Lily Marie was born at 3:47 a.m., weighing just 3 pounds 4 ounces. Her cry was faint, but present, the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. They showed her to me briefly before rushing her to the NICU, her tiny body dwarfed by the medical equipment surrounding her. The next 12 hours were a roller coaster of hope and despair. Lily's lungs were underdeveloped, and she struggled to maintain oxygen levels. Despite the medical team's best efforts, her small body couldn't overcome the multiple challenges of her premature birth and the trauma of the abruption. At 4:12 p.m. that same day, our beautiful daughter Lily slipped away while cradled in our arms. The physical pain of my surgical incision paled in comparison to the crushing weight of grief that descended. Michael and I held each other, our tears mingling, as we said goodbye to the daughter we had barely gotten to know, but already loved beyond measure. The nurses, many of them my colleagues, gave us as much time as we needed, with Lily treating her and us with profound respect and tenderness. Barbara and John arrived shortly after being notified of Lily's birth, only to walk into the tragedy of her passing. They sat with us in the hospital room, sharing our grief without attempting to diminish it with platitudes or false comfort. John, usually stoic, wept openly as he looked at his granddaughter, acknowledging the magnitude of our loss without reservation. When I was stable enough to use the phone, I called my parents to tell them their granddaughter had been born and died on the same day. My father answered, and I could hear the sounds of a sports game playing in the background. "Dad," I said, my voice hollow, "I had the baby today, a little girl. We named her Lily." I paused, gathering strength for the next words. "She didn't make it. There were complications and she was too premature." The background noise continued uninterrupted. "Oh," he finally said, his tone indicating mild surprise but little emotion. "That's tough, kiddo. Your mother wants to know if you'll need surgery or anything." Not if I was okay. Not about his granddaughter. Just practical details. "I already had a C-section," I replied mechanically. "We're making funeral arrangements. We'd like to have it this Saturday." "This Saturday," he repeated, his voice suddenly sharp. "That's going to be a problem. Tyler's having a pool party to celebrate his promotion. It's been planned for weeks. Everyone's coming." I thought I must have misheard him. "Dad, this is Lily's funeral, your granddaughter." "I understand that, but these things are expensive to cancel last minute. Can't you schedule it for Sunday instead?" The conversation continued in this vein, becoming increasingly surreal. Eventually, my father put my mother on the phone, who echoed his concerns about the scheduling conflict. Neither of them had asked to see Lily to say goodbye to their granddaughter, or even how Michael and I were coping with our loss. As I hung up the phone, I felt something shift inside me, as if the last thread connecting me to the hope of parental love and approval had finally snapped. Michael, who had heard my side of the conversation, took the phone gently from my hand and set it aside. "We'll honor Lily properly," he promised, his voice firm despite his own grief, "with or without them." The next few days passed in a fog of grief and necessary decisions. The funeral home director was compassionate as we selected a tiny white casket and discussed service details. Michael's parents helped with arrangements and notified family friends. My parents remained distant, calling only once more to confirm that we had decided to proceed with Saturday's service despite their objections. I focused on creating a beautiful memorial for our daughter, selecting readings and music that would honor her brief but meaningful life. Each decision was painful but necessary, a final act of parenting for the child we would never get to raise. Through it all, the absence of my parents' support was a constant ache beneath the sharper pain of losing Lily. The night before the funeral, as Michael and I sat quietly in the nursery, we had begun to prepare. My phone rang. It was my mother, and I answered, with the faint hope that perhaps she had reconsidered that she would be there for one of the most difficult days of my life. I could not have been more wrong. Samantha, we need to talk about tomorrow. My mother began without preamble, her voice carrying the familiar tone of having already made a decision she expected me to accept. Your father and I have been discussing the situation, and we've come to a conclusion that's going to be difficult for you to hear. I sat down slowly on the rocking chair we had purchased for late-night feedings. That would never happen, my hand instinctively moving to my still tender abdomen. What conclusion, Mom? We won't be able to attend the funeral tomorrow. Tyler's promotion celebration has been planned for weeks, and he's invited several important people from his company. It would be inappropriate for us to cancel at this late date. The words hung in the air between us, so shocking that for a moment I couldn't process them. You're choosing a pool party over your granddaughter's funeral. I finally managed my voice barely above a whisper. Now don't be dramatic, Samantha. It's not just any party. This promotion is a pivotal moment in Tyler's career, and he needs his family's support. Besides, her voice took on an uncomfortably practical tone. It's just a baby. You barely knew her. My breath caught painfully in my chest. Just a baby. She was my daughter. Your granddaughter. Yes, and that's sad, of course it is, my mother replied, her tone suggesting she was humoring me. But you're young. You can have another baby. Tyler needs us right now. This is his moment. I struggled to form words through the rage and grief colliding inside me. Mom, I just lost my child. I am in physical pain from the C-section. I am planning a funeral for a baby I desperately wanted. How can you say Tyler needs you more right now? Samantha. She sighed as if explaining something to a stubborn child. You've always been so independent. You have Michael and his parents. Tyler doesn't have anyone else. He's counting on this party being perfect. The conversation continued in this vein, with my mother offering increasingly callous justifications. My father got on the phone briefly to add that life is for the living, suggesting that focusing on Tyler's success was healthier than dwelling on what can't be changed. When I began to cry, unable to contain my pain any longer, my mother simply said she would call me next week, when I was feeling more reasonable, and hung up. Michael found me still sitting in the rocking chair, phone clutched in my hand, tears streaming silently down my face. When I told him what my parents had said, his expression transformed from concern to fury. That's unforgivable, he said, pacing the small nursery. Completely unforgivable. How dare they? How can they possibly think a party is more important than being there for you, for Lily? I had no answers, only the crushing weight of a rejection so fundamental it seemed to rewrite my entire childhood in its harsh light. All the times I had made excuses for their behavior, all the times I had convinced myself that their emotional distance was just their way, collapsed under the undeniable truth. My parents did not love me the way parents should love their child. That night, unable to sleep, I scrolled through social media and came across Tyler's posts about his upcoming party. He had shared photos of the elaborate preparations, the catered food, the custom cocktails named after departments in his company. In one image, I spotted my parents in the background, helping to set up decorations, their faces animated with an enthusiasm I couldn't remember ever seeing directed at me. On impulse, I messaged Tyler directly. We had never been close, but he was still my brother, and some desperate part of me hoped he might understand, might even convince our parents to reconsider. Tyler, I know tomorrow is important to you, I wrote, but it's Lily's funeral. Is there any way you could reschedule your party just by a day or two? It would mean so much to have our family together for this. His response came quickly. Sorry about your baby Sam, but this party is crucial for my networking. Mom and Dad already promised they'd be here. Can't you just have your thing on Sunday instead? People will understand. I stared at the message, the casual dismissal of my daughter as your baby, and her funeral as your thing, leaving me breathless with pain. There was no point in replying. The message only confirmed what I already knew in my family's hierarchy of needs. Mine would always come last. I deleted the message thread, and then, after a moment's reflection, unfollowed both Tyler and my parents on all social platforms. It was a small gesture, insignificant in the grand scheme of things, but it felt like the first step toward protecting myself from further hurt. Michael found me in the kitchen at 3 in the morning, staring blankly at a cup of cold tea. Without words, he wrapped his arms around me from behind his chest, solid and warm against my back. We stood like that for a long time, bound together by grief and the growing understanding that we would need to be each other's primary family now more than ever. "We'll get through tomorrow," he whispered against my hair. "And the day after that, and the one after that. Not easily, not without pain, but we will. Lily deserves to be honored properly, and we'll make sure that happens no matter who else is or isn't there." I nodded, finding a small measure of strength in his certainty. As dawn broke, casting pale light across our kitchen, I made a silent promise to my daughter. Her brief life would not be dismissed as unimportant. She would be remembered, her impact, acknowledged, her existence honored. And in that promise, I found the resolve to face the coming day. The morning of Lily's funeral dawned with an inappropriate brightness, sunlight streaming through our bedroom windows, as if mocking our grief. I woke with dread settling heavy in my stomach, the reality of what the day would bring crashing over me anew. Michael helped me dress my body still weak from surgery and sleepless nights. I chose a simple black dress, nothing I'd worn before, unable to bear the thought of later associating any familiar clothing with this darkest of days. At the small chapel, the funeral director greeted us with practiced sympathy. The room had been arranged just as we'd requested, with white lilies and soft pink roses surrounding the tiny white casket at the front. The sight of it, so small yet so final, nearly brought me to my knees. Michael's arm around my waist was the only thing keeping me upright. Barbara and John arrived early, Barbara immediately enfolding me in a gentle embrace that carefully avoided my healing incision. John carried a small teddy bear that he placed beside the casket with trembling hands. "For Lily," he said simply, his voice thick with emotion. As other attendees began to arrive, my eyes kept darting to the door, some irrational part of me still hoping my parents might have changed their minds. The chairs reserved for them in the front row remained conspicuously empty, as the chapel filled with friends, colleagues, and Michael's extended family. The service began, the pastor's kind voice, speaking of brief lives and lasting impact. I sat rigid beside Michael, his hand clasped tightly in mine, as various people offered readings and remembrances. Though Lily had lived for only hours, the love people expressed for her and for us was profound and genuine. When it came time for me to speak, I wasn't sure I could do it. How could I possibly find words for this loss, this love, this emptiness? Michael squeezed my hand as I slowly made my way to the front. The paper with my prepared words clutched so tightly it had crumpled in my fist. "Lily Marie," I began, my voice wavering but gaining strength as I continued. "Lived for only 12 hours and 25 minutes. Some might say that's not enough time to make a difference in this world. Some might even say it's just a baby," as if the brevity of her life diminished its importance. I paused, swallowing hard against the lump in my throat, aware of the gasps from those who understood the reference to my parents' callous words. But those 12 hours changed me forever. Lily taught me what unconditional love truly feels like. She showed me that time doesn't measure impact. And she revealed with perfect clarity who truly stands beside us in our darkest moments. I spoke about holding her, about counting her tiny fingers and toes, about the perfect bow of her lips, and the surprising strength with which she had briefly gripped my finger. I shared the hopes and dreams we'd had for her, acknowledging their loss while affirming the love that had created them. When I returned to my seat, Michael pulled me close, his tears wetting my hair as he pressed a kiss to my temple. Barbara passed me a tissue, her eyes red-rimmed but filled with pride. After the service, as people filed past the casket to pay their final respects, my phone buzzed in my purse. I ignored it at first, but when it buzzed again insistently, I glanced at the screen. It was a text from my friend Amanda, who had been unable to attend due to being out of state. "I'm so sorry I can't be there today. Thinking of you and Lily. Is there anything you need?" Attached to her message was a screenshot from Instagram. With growing horror, I realized it was from Tyler's account posted just 30 minutes earlier. The image showed my parents, drinks in hand, laughing beside a pool decorated with balloons and banners celebrating Tyler's promotion. The caption read, "Best parents ever showing up for all my big moments. #blessed, #family support, #pool party." The phone slipped from my suddenly numb fingers, clattering to the floor. Michael picked it up, his expression darkening as he saw what had caused my reaction. He quickly showed the phone to his father, who took it and discreetly placed it in his pocket, preventing others from seeing the image. "Samantha," Michael said gently, "we don't have to go to the cemetery right now if you don't feel up to it. We can take a moment." But I shook my head, a strange calm settling over me. "No, I want to finish this properly. For Lily." The drive to the cemetery passed in silence. The graveside service was brief, the finality of watching that small white casket being lowered into the ground almost unbearable. I dropped a single white lily onto the casket, whispering a private goodbye to my daughter. Michael followed with a pink rose, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. As others added flowers and murmured condolences, I stood motionless, my mind struggling to process the contrast between this solemn ceremony and the celebration my parents had chosen instead. The physical pain of my healing body merged with the emotional agony, creating a hurt so profound it transcended tears. After the final prayers, people began to disperse. Several had offered to come back to our house, where Barbara had arranged a small reception, but I couldn't face more hours of condolences and sympathy. Michael understood without words, thanking people, but explaining that we needed time alone. When we arrived home, I walked straight to the nursery and stood in the doorway, taking in the half-finished space. The crib without bedding, the changing table stacked with unopened packages of diapers, the rocking chair where I'd imagined countless future nights of lullabies and quiet bonding. Everything perfectly prepared for a baby who would never use any of it. The enormity of our loss, coupled with my parents' betrayal, finally broke through the shock that had been insulating me. I collapsed to my knees, a primal wail tearing from my throat. Michael was instantly beside me, holding me as I screamed and sobbed, my body heaving with grief too massive to contain. "They didn't come," I kept repeating between gasps for air. "Their own granddaughter, and they chose a party. They said she was just a baby Michael. How could they say that? How could they do this?" Michael had no answers, only his steady presence and his shared grief. We stayed on the floor of the nursery until my sobs quieted to hiccuping breaths, and the physical pain of my healing incision demanded attention. As he helped me to bed, bringing water and pain medication, I felt something solidifying inside me, a resolve, a boundary, a decision. "I can't do this anymore," I whispered, as Michael gently arranged pillows to support my aching body. "I can't keep trying with them. Not after this. Not ever again." He nodded, brushing hair from my tear-stained face with infinite tenderness. "You don't have to. Whatever you decide about your relationship with your parents, I'll support you completely." As I drifted into exhausted sleep, my last conscious thought was of Lily, her perfect tiny face, and the peace she had seemed to embody in those few precious hours. In the midst of this shattering pain, the memory felt like a gift, a reminder that even the briefest life could contain profound love, and that sometimes the deepest loss reveals our most important truths. The days following Lily's funeral blurred together in a haze of grief and physical recovery. I moved through our house like a ghost, mechanically taking my pain medication, picking at the food Michael prepared, sleeping in fitful bursts interrupted by nightmares. The physical trauma of the emergency C-section, coupled with the emotional devastation, left me barely functioning. Michael took extended leave from work, caring for me with quiet dedication. He fielded calls and messages, protected me from well-intentioned but exhausting visitors, and simply sat with me during the worst moments when grief would suddenly overcome me like a tidal wave, leaving me gasping and disoriented. 3 days after the funeral, my phone lit up with my mother's name. I stared at it ringing on the coffee table, making no move to answer. When it finally stopped, a text message appeared. "We should talk soon. Your father and I are concerned about you. Tyler's party was a great success, by the way. His boss was very impressed with everything." The casual mention of the party, as if it had been an ordinary scheduling conflict rather than a devastating choice, ignited a rage I hadn't known I was capable of feeling. I threw my phone across the room where it hit the wall with a satisfying crack before falling to the floor, screen shattered. Michael appeared in the doorway, alarmed by the noise. Without a word, he crossed the room, picked up the broken phone, and sat beside me. "What happened?" he asked gently. I showed him the text message, still visible through the spiderweb of cracks across the screen. His jaw tightened as he read it, but his voice remained calm when he spoke. "You don't owe them a response, Samantha. Not now, not ever, if that's what you decide." A week later, my mother called Michael's phone, apparently having given up on reaching me directly. He spoke to her briefly in the kitchen, while I remained in the living room, able to hear his side of the conversation. "Yes, she's still recovering both physically and emotionally. No, I don't think now is a good time for a visit. Yes, I understand you're her parents, but..." His voice took on an edge I rarely heard. "With all due respect, you made your priorities very clear when you chose not to attend Lily's funeral. No, I don't think that's an exaggeration at all." When he returned to the living room, his expression was carefully neutral. "They want to come over tomorrow for dinner. They think it's time to move past this unfortunate situation and get back to normal." Normal. I repeated the word, tasting bitter in my mouth. As if there could ever be a normal again. As if missing their granddaughter's funeral for a party is something to just move past. Michael sat beside me, taking my hands in his. "You don't have to see them. Not tomorrow, not next week, not ever. If that's what you need. Whatever you decide, I'm with you." That night, I had a particularly vivid dream about Lily. She wasn't the premature infant we had held so briefly, but a toddler with Michael's eyes and my smile running through a sunlit garden. When I woke, tears streaming down my face, I felt a clarity that had been absent in the foggy days of deep grief. "I need to see a therapist," I told Michael over breakfast. "Someone who specializes in grief and family trauma. I can't keep living in this limbo." He immediately began researching options, and by the end of the day, I had an appointment scheduled with Dr. Elena Patel, a psychologist specializing in perinatal loss and family dynamics. At our first session, I poured out everything, the lifelong pattern of being second best to Tyler, the dismissal of my grief, the unthinkable choice my parents had made, and the raw, unrelenting pain of losing Lily. Dr. Patel listened without judgment, her calm presence creating a safe space for my anger and sorrow. When I finished speaking, spent and exhausted, she leaned forward slightly. "What you're describing goes beyond normal family dysfunction, Samantha. The consistent pattern of your parents prioritizing your brother's needs above yours, even in the face of your profound loss, suggests emotional neglect that has likely affected you in ways you're still discovering. And their dismissal of your grief with phrases like 'it's just a baby' is particularly harmful." Hearing a professional name and validate what I had experienced sent a tremor of recognition through me. All the years of making excuses, of telling myself I was overreacting or being too sensitive, collapsed under the weight of this simple acknowledgement. "So what do I do now?" I asked, wiping fresh tears. "They're still my parents. They're the only ones I'll ever have." "That's true," Dr. Patel acknowledged. "But biology doesn't entitle anyone to a relationship with you, especially when that relationship causes harm. The question isn't whether they're your parents, but whether maintaining a relationship with them is healthy for you as you grieve and eventually heal." Over the next several sessions, we explored my family history in greater depth. Patel helped me recognize patterns I had normalized, the subtle and not so subtle ways my parents had consistently communicated that my needs and feelings mattered less than Tyler's. She introduced me to concepts like the golden child and scapegoat dynamics in families. And for the first time, I began to see that the problem had never been my worth, but their inability to love fairly or fully. Meanwhile, my parents continued their attempts to resume normal relations. They sent text messages asking about dinner plans, left voicemails suggesting we put this unfortunate misunderstanding behind us, and even showed up unannounced at our door one Saturday morning, acting as if nothing had happened. Michael intercepted them on the porch firmly, but politely explaining that I wasn't ready to see them. From the bedroom window, I watched my father's face redden with indignation, and my mother's expression harden into familiar disapproval before they reluctantly returned to their car. With Dr. Patel's guidance, I drafted an email to my parents feeling that a written communication would allow me to express myself completely without interruption or manipulation. I spent days on it, editing and revising, until every word felt true to my experience. Dear Mom and Dad, I wrote, I am writing to you because I need to express how deeply your actions surrounding Lily's birth and death have affected me. Your decision to attend Tyler's pool party instead of your granddaughter's funeral was not a simple scheduling conflict. It was a profound statement about who and what you value in your life and where I stand in that hierarchy. This was not an isolated incident, but the most painful example of a lifelong pattern. From childhood, I have watched you prioritize Tyler's wants over my needs, celebrate his minor achievements while overlooking my major ones, and consistently communicate through words and actions that he matters more. I am not writing this to assign blame or to ask for apologies that would not change what has happened. I am writing to let you know that I need time and space to grieve not only the loss of my daughter, but also the loss of the parental support and love I deserved, but never received. I ask that you respect my need for distance at this time. I do not know what our relationship will look like in the future, but I know it cannot return to what it was before. I concluded the email by stating that any attempts to contact me directly or to show up unannounced would only extend the period of separation, and that if and when I was ready to communicate, I would reach out to them. I pressed send with trembling fingers, but a clear conscience feeling, as though I had finally spoken my truth after a lifetime of silence. Their responses came separately and revealed everything about why this distance was necessary. My mother's email expressed shock that I would blow a single incident out of proportion and accused me of being selfish and dramatic as usual. My father wrote a terse 3 lines saying he was disappointed in my attitude and that family should stick together, not create problems. Tyler's response after my parents presumably shared my email with him was perhaps the most telling. Way to make my promotion all about you, he wrote. Mom and Dad are really upset now, thanks a lot. Some of us have actual careers to focus on, not just sob stories. I forwarded all 3 emails to Dr. Patel without comment. At our next session, she read them carefully before meeting my eyes. These responses, she said gently, tell you everything you need to know about whether your decision to create distance was the right one. Not one of them acknowledges your pain or takes responsibility for their actions. Instead, they all center their own feelings and experiences exactly the pattern you described. In that moment, something shifted inside me. The desperate hope that they might somehow recognize the pain they had caused, that they might transform into the parents I had always longed for, finally began to fade. In its place grew a quiet, sad acceptance of reality, and with it the first tender shoots of freedom. When I returned home that day, I found Michael in the nursery carefully packing Lily's unworn clothes into storage boxes. He looked up when I entered, his expression questioning, ready to stop if it was too painful for me to witness. Instead, I knelt beside him and picked up a tiny pink onesie, running my thumb over the soft fabric. We should donate these, I said softly, to the hospital's NICU or to a women's shelter. Someone else's baby should get to wear them. Michael nodded, understanding that this was not just about the clothes, but about finding meaning in our loss, about transforming pain into something that might help others. As we worked together, carefully folding each small item, I told him about my session and the clarity I had reached about my family. I think I need to create something in Lily's memory, I said as we sealed the last box. something that acknowledges what happened to us and might help other parents going through similar situations. That night, I researched organizations supporting families experiencing infant loss. I was struck by how many mentioned the financial burden of funeral expenses, coming at a time of profound emotional devastation. An idea began to form a way to honor Lily, while helping others facing the same unimaginable pain. The next day, I contacted a lawyer friend about establishing a small foundation. The Lily Marie Memorial Fund would provide financial assistance to families needing to arrange funerals for infants, ensuring that every baby could have a dignified farewell, regardless of their family's resources. As I worked on the foundation using a small inheritance from Michael's grandmother as seed funding, I felt a sense of purpose emerging from the ashes of grief. I couldn't bring Lily back, couldn't change my parents' choices, couldn't erase the pain of loss, but I could create meaning from the experience, could transform the darkest moment of my life into a source of light for others walking the same painful path. And in that purpose, in the conscious choice to honor, rather than forget to create, rather than merely survive, I found the first fragile beginnings of healing. 1 year after Lily's birth and death, Michael and I stood beside her small grave, now covered with lush grass, and marked by a simple headstone bearing her name and the dates that were the same. I placed a bouquet of white lilies and pink roses, mirroring the flowers from her funeral, while Michael set down a small stuffed bear, similar to the one his father had left beside her casket. 1 year, I said softly, my hand finding Michael's. It feels both longer and shorter, doesn't it? He nodded, squeezing my fingers gently. Some days it feels like yesterday, others like a lifetime ago. The seasons had cycled through their changes, while we navigated the terrain of grief each holiday, and milestone bringing its own unique pain. The first Christmas without the baby we had expected to celebrate with. The due date that should have marked Lily's arrival, but instead passed in quiet remembrance. Mother's Day, Father's Day, each a complicated tangle of identity and loss. Through it all, Dr. Patel's guidance had been invaluable. In weekly sessions, she had helped me understand that grief isn't linear, that healing doesn't mean forgetting, and that maintaining boundaries with my family of origin wasn't selfish, but necessary for my well-being. The Lily Marie Memorial Fund had become my passion project, growing beyond my initial vision. We had provided financial assistance for funeral expenses to 17 families in the past year. Additionally, we had expanded to offer memory boxes to hospitals, containing items that would help parents create tangible memories in the brief time they had, with babies not expected to survive tiny hand and footprint kits, special blankets, cameras for photographs, journals for writing letters and memories. Working on the foundation had connected me with a community of bereaved parents who understood the unique pain of losing a child. Through support groups and online forums, I found people who didn't flinch from the rawness of infant loss, who didn't expect me to move on or get over it. These connections became a lifeline, particularly in the early months when even getting out of bed seemed an insurmountable task. My relationship with my parents and Tyler remained distant. After my email setting boundaries, they had made sporadic attempts to reestablish contact on their terms, always without acknowledgement of the harm they had caused. Each time I had calmly restated my needs and refused to engage in their preferred pattern of pretending nothing was wrong. Some extended family members had taken sides, with most supporting my parents' narrative that I was being dramatic and holding a grudge. But a few had reached out privately, sharing their own experiences of witnessing the unequal treatment between Tyler and me over the years. My father's sister, Aunt Caroline, had been particularly supportive, telling me she had always seen the favoritism, but had felt powerless to intervene. "I should have said something years ago," she admitted during a lunch we shared 6 months after the funeral. "I saw how they treated you, how they always made Tyler the center of everything. I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere, but that was cowardice on my part. I'm sorry, Samantha." Her acknowledgement was healing in ways I hadn't anticipated validation from someone who had witnessed the family dynamic from the inside. We developed a closer relationship with Aunt Caroline, becoming something of a surrogate mother figure, showing me what maternal love could look like. Michael's parents remained steadfast in their support. Barbara called regularly just to check in, never pushing for false cheerfulness, but creating space for whatever I was feeling. John sent thoughtful texts on difficult days, somehow knowing when I might need an extra word of encouragement. They attended every foundation event, donated generously, and spoke of Lily as the granddaughter they had lost, keeping her memory alive through their love. In therapy, I had begun to explore the possibility of trying for another child. The idea brought complicated emotions: fear of another loss, worry that a subsequent child might feel like a replacement, concern that pregnancy would trigger traumatic memories. Dr. Patel helped me work through these feelings, assuring me that loving another child wouldn't diminish my love for Lily, that fear was a natural response to trauma, and that these concerns showed my capacity for thoughtful parenthood rather than any deficiency. Just as Michael and I had started to consider actively trying to conceive again, I discovered I was already pregnant. The positive test brought a tornado of emotions: joy and terror, hope and panic, excitement and grief. The reality that this new baby would never have known Lily, that they would never be sisters in this life, hit me with unexpected force. Dr. Martinez, my obstetrician, classified the pregnancy as high risk due to my previous experience with placental abruption. She scheduled more frequent checkups, prescribed preventative medications, and referred me to a maternal fetal medicine specialist for additional monitoring. Every appointment brought both reassurance and anxiety, the memory of how quickly things had changed with Lily, hovering like a shadow over each positive report. At 16 weeks, when we learned we were having a boy, I broke down in the ultrasound room, great heaving sobs that confused the technician, but that Michael immediately understood. A son meant we wouldn't face the constant comparisons to Lily that might have come with another daughter. But it also meant another kind of separation, another reminder that this child was not a replacement, could never be a replacement for the daughter we had lost. As my belly grew, so did the complicated emotions. I talked to Dr. Patel about the guilt I felt in moments of joy, as if being happy about this baby somehow betrayed Lily's memory. She helped me see that love isn't finite, that my heart could expand to include both the child I had lost and the one growing inside me. "Lily will always be your firstborn," she said during one particularly difficult session. "Nothing can change that, not even the birth of siblings. Her place in your family is permanent, whether she is physically present or not." At 20 weeks, halfway through the pregnancy and well past the point where we had started having complications with Lily, I received a letter from my mother. The envelope sat unopened on our kitchen counter for 3 days before I finally found the courage to read it. Inside was a newspaper clipping about the Lily Marie Memorial Fund, which had been featured in a local human interest story. Beneath it, my mother had written a brief note: "We saw this in the paper. You've done a nice thing. We're hearing you're expecting again. Hope all goes well. Love, Mom." No acknowledgement of their absence during the worst time of my life. No recognition of the ongoing pain their choices had caused. Just a vague pleasantry, as if commenting on a craft project, rather than a foundation born from the deepest grief created in memory of the granddaughter whose funeral they had skipped. I showed the note to Michael, who read it with a frown. "This is exactly why maintaining distance has been the right choice," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "They're still not seeing you, Samantha. Still not acknowledging what matters." He was right, of course. The note made clear that nothing fundamental had changed in my parents' perspective. In their world, the past was still something to gloss over, rather than address my feelings, still something to minimize rather than respect. The disappointment was real, but no longer devastating. I had stopped expecting them to become different people, had accepted that the loving, supportive parents I had longed for existed only in wishful thinking, not in reality. As my due date approached, I worked with Dr. Patel on a birth plan that acknowledged the trauma of my previous experience. We discussed coping mechanisms for flashbacks, strategies for managing anxiety, and the importance of clear communication with the medical team. Michael attended every therapy session focused on the birth, committed to understanding how best to support me through what would inevitably be an emotionally complex experience. The contractions began 2 weeks before my due date, mild at first, but steadily intensifying. Unlike the emergency rush with Lily this time, we drove calmly to the hospital, our packed bags ready, our birth plan in hand. The labor was long but uncomplicated, each stage unfolding as it should, without the terrifying complications that had marked Lily's birth. When our son finally emerged after 18 hours of labor, his powerful cry filled the delivery room. The sound, so different from Lily's faint whimper, brought tears of both joy and grief streaming down my face. Michael cut the cord with trembling hands, and the nurses placed our son on my chest, his tiny body warm and wriggling against my skin. We named him James after Michael's father, with the middle name William, which had been my grandfather's name. At 8 pounds 3 ounces, he was more than twice Lily's weight, his body robust, where hers had been fragile, his grasp strong, where hers had been fleeting. The differences only underscored the uniqueness of each child, the impossibility of replacement. In the quiet of our hospital room, as Michael slept in the chair beside us, and James nursed contentedly at my breast, I whispered to him about his sister. I promised that he would know her story, that her memory would be honored in our family, that the brief life that had preceded his had changed us all in profound ways. 2 days after James was born, as we were preparing to leave the hospital, my phone rang with my mother's number. After a moment's hesitation, I answered. "Samantha, your father and I just heard that you've had the baby," she began, her voice oddly formal. "We wanted to congratulate you and Michael." "Thank you," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "We were thinking we might come visit this weekend, see the baby. It's been a long time since we've talked, and this seems like a good opportunity to put everything behind us." The old pattern so familiar, no acknowledgement of the past, no respect for my boundaries, just an expectation that I would accommodate their wishes and pretend the hurt had never happened. "Mom, I appreciate the call, but this isn't the right time," I said firmly. "James is only 2 days old, and we're still adjusting. More importantly, nothing has been resolved between us. You and Dad have never acknowledged or apologized for missing Lily's funeral, or for dismissing her as just a baby. Until that happens, I don't see how we can move forward." "Samantha," she sighed, the exasperation clear in her voice. "It's been over a year. Don't you think it's time to let this go? We're your parents. We're James's grandparents. Family should stick together." "Family should support each other," I countered, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "Family should show up for the hardest moments, not just the celebrations. Family should acknowledge harm when it's caused, not pretend it never happened." The conversation continued in this vein, with my mother becoming increasingly frustrated by my refusal to capitulate. When she finally said, "Well, I guess you're determined to punish us forever then," I knew nothing had changed. "This isn't about punishment, Mom. It's about protection. I'm protecting myself and my son from the kind of dismissal and conditional love I experienced growing up. If you and Dad ever truly want to be part of our lives, you'll need to acknowledge the past and commit to doing better in the future. Until then, I wish you well, but I need to maintain this distance." After hanging up, I felt a strange sense of peace. The conversation had confirmed that my boundaries were necessary and justified. More importantly, it had shown me how much I had grown, how much stronger I had become in standing up for myself and now for my son. Michael returned from the cafeteria to find me standing by the window, James sleeping peacefully in the bassinet beside me. "Everything okay?" he asked, noting my pensive expression. I told him about the call, about maintaining my boundaries despite the pressure to relent. He wrapped his arms around me, careful of my still tender body, and pressed a kiss to my forehead. "I'm proud of you," he said simply. "It takes courage to protect your peace, especially when it comes to family." As we drove home with our newborn son secured in his car seat, passing through familiar neighborhoods toward the house that had known both our deepest grief and now this new joy, I reflected on the journey of the past year. The loss of Lily had broken me open in ways I could never have imagined, revealing both profound pain and unexpected strength. The absence of my parents' support had forced me to recognize the difference between the family I had been born into and the family I was choosing to create. James would grow up surrounded by love that didn't come with conditions or comparisons. He would know about his sister Lily, whose brief life had taught us so much about what really matters. And he would understand when he was old enough that sometimes the healthiest thing we can do for ourselves is to accept people for who they truly are, even when that means creating distance. As we pulled into our driveway home at last with our son, I felt a sense of completion, not because grief had ended, it never truly would, but because I had found a way to carry it alongside joy, to honor the past, while embracing the future, to love deeply, despite the risk of loss. In the nursery that had been prepared first for Lily, and now welcomed James, I placed him gently in his crib for the first time. Above it hung a small dream catcher made of silver and crystal, catching the afternoon light and sending tiny rainbows dancing across the walls. It had been a gift from a fellow bereaved mother in my support group who had explained its meaning: to catch the dreams Lily sends to her brother, to keep the connection between them strong. Looking down at my sleeping son, I whispered the promise I had made on the day I learned my parents would not attend Lily's funeral, the promise that had guided me through the darkest days. You will always be seen. You will always be valued. And you will always be loved exactly as you are. In that moment, surrounded by the tangible evidence of love's endurance, I finally understood that the greatest gift we can give our children isn't protection from all pain. It's the example of how to survive it with dignity and grace, how to build something meaningful from life's deepest sorrows, and how to recognize true love when it appears in our lives. And in that understanding, I found peace. As I stand here today, 3 years after losing Lily, and 2 years after welcoming James into our family, I can look back on the journey with a perspective I never thought possible in those early days of raw grief. The path from that devastating moment when my parents chose Tyler's pool party over their granddaughter's funeral to now has been neither straight nor easy, but it has led to a place of unexpected wisdom and peace. James toddles around our living room now, his chubby legs still unsteady, but his determination unwavering. At 2 years old, he has his father's curious eyes, and my stubborn chin, a unique blend of us both, yet entirely his own person. On the mantel above the fireplace sits a small silver frame containing Lily's only photograph, her tiny face peaceful in eternal sleep. James knows her name, pointing to her picture and saying Lil, in his baby voice too young to understand the complexity of her absence, but already learning that she holds an important place in our family. The Lily Marie Memorial Fund has grown beyond my initial vision, now serving families across 3 states. Last year, we were able to provide financial assistance for funeral expenses to over 40 families and distribute memory boxes to 15 hospitals. What began as a way to channel my grief has become a living legacy, a testament to the impact one brief life can have on the world. My relationship with my parents remains complicated. After James was born, they made several attempts to reestablish contact, always on their terms, always without acknowledgement of the past. When James was 6 months old, they sent a large package of baby clothes and toys, accompanied by a note suggesting they visit to get to know their grandson. After much discussion with Michael and Dr. Patel, I replied with clear boundaries. They could meet James, but only after we had a meaningful conversation addressing their actions surrounding Lily's funeral and establishing expectations for healthy interaction going forward. My mother called this emotional blackmail and suggested I was using James to punish them. My father sent an email stating they had done nothing wrong and were tired of walking on eggshells around me. Their responses only confirmed the wisdom of maintaining distance. While I had once hoped for reconciliation, I've come to accept that my parents are unlikely to change in fundamental ways. The favoritism that defined my childhood continues to shape their perspective, preventing them from seeing how their actions impact others. Tyler remains the center of their world, his needs and wants prioritized above all else. Interestingly, my relationship with Tyler himself has evolved in unexpected ways. 6 months ago, he called me out of the blue, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. He had experienced a significant professional setback, being passed over for a promotion he had considered guaranteed. For the first time, our parents' constant praise had not translated into real-world success, and the experience had shaken his self-perception. "I've been thinking about Lily," he admitted during that call, surprising me with the mention of the niece he had never acknowledged. "About how I acted when she died. I was so focused on my promotion, on what I wanted. I never really thought about what you were going through." It wasn't a full apology, but it was a moment of self-awareness I had never witnessed in my brother before. We've had several conversations since cautious exchanges that reveal a slowly emerging maturity on his part. I don't know if we'll ever be close too much water under that bridge, but there's a possibility of a more authentic relationship than I would have thought possible. Michael remains my rock, my partner in both grief and joy. Our marriage, tested by the fire of profound loss, has emerged stronger for the tempering. We've learned to communicate through the hardest emotions, to hold space for each other's pain, without trying to fix or minimize it. The experience of losing Lily and navigating the complicated aftermath with my family has taught us both about the kind of parents we want to be to James and to any future children we might be blessed with. Barbara and John Michael's parents have become even more important figures in our lives. They visit regularly, lavishing James with the kind of grandparental love I had always imagined for my children. They never fail to acknowledge Lily on important dates, sending flowers on her birthday and the anniversary of her death, keeping her memory alive through simple, meaningful gestures. Last month, at Dr. Patel's suggestion, I began a journal addressed to Lily, writing letters about our daily life, about how she continues to impact us, about the brother who will know her only through our stories. The process has been healing, a way to maintain connection with a daughter whose life was brief, but whose impact continues to ripple outward. In my latest entry, I wrote about forgiveness, not as a gift to those who hurt us, but as a release for ourselves. I'm not there yet with my parents, the wound still too raw, the behavior still too ongoing. But I've come to understand that forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation, that I can release the anger without resuming a relationship that was fundamentally unhealthy. The grief of losing Lily will never completely disappear. It has changed form over time, becoming less raw, less all-consuming, but remaining a part of me. On some days, like her birthday, or when I see a baby girl the age she would have been, the pain resurfaces with unexpected intensity. I've learned not to fight these moments, but to move through them, honoring the feelings rather than suppressing them. What I never expected was how grief could coexist with joy, how the love for the child I lost could inform and deepen the love for the child in my arms. James isn't a replacement for Lily, could never be a replacement. He is his own person, precious and complete, just as she was precious and complete in her too brief time with us. The most profound lesson I've learned through this journey is about the nature of family itself. Family isn't just about blood connections or shared DNA. True family consists of the people who show up for us in our darkest moments, who respect our boundaries and honor our experiences, who love us not for what we can do for them, but simply for who we are. Michael, James, Barbara, John, Aunt Caroline, my grief support group, the parents I've connected with through the Lily Marie Memorial Fund. These are my family, now chosen and cherished. They may not all share my name or my genetic code, but they share something far more important, a commitment to authentic love and respect. As for my parents, I've come to a place of acceptance rather than expectation. I accept that they are limited in what they can give, constrained by patterns too deeply ingrained to change easily. I no longer expect them to become the parents I needed, no longer wait for an acknowledgement that may never come. This acceptance has been liberating, freeing me from the cycle of hope and disappointment that defined our relationship for so long. The promise I made the day of Lily's funeral, standing alone by her tiny casket, has shaped every decision since to value myself and my children, enough to demand basic respect to create a family environment where everyone is seen and valued, to transform pain into purpose, rather than allowing it to embitter me. Lily's brief life transformed me in ways I'm still discovering. Through losing her, I found my voice, my boundaries, my capacity for both profound grief and enduring joy. She taught me that impact isn't measured in time, that meaning can be found in our darkest moments, and that sometimes the deepest losses reveal our most important truths. If you've stayed with me through this story, perhaps you've recognized elements of your own family dynamics, your own struggles with conditional love or toxic relationships. Perhaps you too have faced the impossible task of saying goodbye to a child, or have stood alone during times when you most needed support. If so, I want you to know that healing is possible, that boundaries are necessary, and that finding your true family, whether related by blood or by choice, is one of life's most important journeys. I'd love to hear your thoughts or experiences in the comments below. Have you had to create distance from family for your own well-being? How have you honored lost loved ones in meaningful ways? Your stories matter, and sharing them helps us all feel less alone in our most difficult moments. Before you go, please consider subscribing to follow more stories of resilience and transformation. If this narrative resonated with you, giving it a like helps others find it too. And sharing it might reach someone who desperately needs to hear they're not alone in their struggles with family or loss. Thank you for witnessing my journey, for holding space for both Lily's memory and James's future. In sharing our stories, we create connections that transcend our individual experiences, weaving together a tapestry of human resilience that is both beautiful and strong.